start recording this call. Okay, so we can make it available for everyone else that could not attend today. Hayden, thanks very much for joining today. I think we have around 12 people, and hopefully some more are joining. I think we had around 20 scheduled for today. So I believe that in respect to those that are here on time, we should start. So I'm going to quickly introduce Hayden, and then let him take the floor, and we can go over the questions we have from y'all, and also Hayden has from his own that can help us. Well, Hayden is one of the founders of Kingmakers, and right now is developing a Snowball. He's going to talk about that. That's a venture to roll up home service companies, and the aim is to take it public in 2022. His role is in the strategic planning, systems development, training, culture, and vision. So no more introductions. Hayden.
Thanks, Daniel. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. What's the best format for this? Is this more of like a Q&A from everyone?
Yes, we have questions, so we can go straight to the questions, and also some other that participants may want to post here through the chat. And you can also talk about what you have proposed. I believe that's the general idea, that acquisition entrepreneurs can better understand the not only the pre-acquisition but post-acquisition value Acquira offers.
Okay, sure. I can give a bit of a background. So I've co-founded Kingmakers with my partner Devin Soni, who's got more of a financial background, back in 2018, 2017. Before that, we had both operated a company called Wired Investors, which basically purchased and operated about close to 20 businesses, all of them digital in nature. My background originally was more digital marketing, so it made a lot of sense. We kind of found, we went through the whole Jim Collins flywheel exercise and kind of found that our strengths, where we found unexpected success, seemed to come from systems and training. And we really wanted to get more involved in this space. We think acquisition entrepreneurship is probably the future of entrepreneurship. It's kind of this third path that is the best of both worlds. So that's how we formed Kingmakers. People said the name sounded a little sexist, so we rebranded to Acquira. And yeah, one of the things that's happened along the way is we bought some businesses. Our first business that we bought was we took a minority stake in an HVAC and water softening business in Phoenix, and that was the first sort of our bullet before Cannonball that we tried out for offline businesses, and that went really well. And we ended up meeting another partner called Enduring Ventures, who was also looking to get into the space. They had rolled up some basically rural ISP companies and like a pool business. And we decided to join forces and create Snowball, which was for me also a great opportunity to get really in the weeds with operations and build out all the process, procedure, et cetera. So I've been working on that for the last 6 months or so. We're still working on it. We've bought 3 businesses, collectively about 50 million in revenue, about 10 million, a little less than 10 million in EBITDA, all plumbing and HVAC service businesses, some construction behind it as well. I'm happy to answer anything about those businesses, anything about Snowball itself. As Daniel said, our goal is to take it public, probably in Q2 of 2022. We're about to launch a Regulation A plus raise as well in order to purchase more businesses. And yeah, our long-term goal is to make it 50% employee owned. And Oh, we have a bunch of vision statements, but I don't think we have time to get into that here. So happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Excellent. I think I have, a few, and would like to start by those that we received in advance. So, for example, one question here. Is there a post-closing acceleration program with detailed steps on how to grow and manage a business?
Yes, there are a few. So we've created something called the Integrated Business Framework, and basically have kind of defined an integrated business as a board-run company, where ideally you sit on the board, someone from Acquira sits on the board, maybe you have a guest board member. But the goal of it is essentially absentee ownerism more than anything. So probably bi-monthly board meetings. Now it's going to take a while to get there. Probably fastest would be a year. More likely scenario is 2 years. And so there's a framework called the Integrated Business Framework that has all the components and a timeline. And then that links to more frameworks around each of the components. So right now, there's one on culture. It's called the Culture and Clarity Framework. So this is for all people systems, everything from recruiting, reference checks, hiring, like employee evaluation, training, etc. All meetings, one-on-ones, etc. We have an operations framework, which is kind of home service focused right now, but that's more on creating your KPIs for everyone, creating an operating model, demand planning, etc. And then we're currently working on a sales and marketing framework, and probably like about 70 different general procedures that we have in place that we can share.
That's excellent, because I receive a lot of questions from our, acquisition entrepreneurs asking about what happens post-closing, right? Why do I want to have Acquira as a minority partner? Well, because of all of these you're talking about. And actually following this, using this framework is the first step to my next acquisition, right? Rather than me figuring out by myself.
Yeah, and my recommendation for people is that, especially if someone doesn't want to be as crucially involved, you hire a GM and start putting them through this. And you do that, as soon as an APA is signed, which is what we did with our first business. Well, not all of this stuff was ready at that time. But.
Perfect. Excellent. So can you elaborate? I have another question here. How is the Snowball investment of $200,000 different than the 30% equity Acquira offers? What services are provided in each?
Okay, so that's a completely different offering. It's something we're testing right now. Basically, we're looking for a win-win. So Snowball is really only interested in buying businesses that are making over $1 million in EBITDA, right? Anything smaller than that doesn't really make sense. Obviously, we find a lot of businesses that are slightly below that, maybe 700K, 600K. And what we thought of is there a way where we can incentivize acquisition entrepreneurs to effectively buy and grow that business, and then we can invest in that business without taking any equity, only to get a warrant to buy that business at a higher multiple. And our goal is basically, is there a way that we can, within 2 years of effort, give an acquisition entrepreneur 200K to invest in creating an integrated business, right? The way I just defined, in order for him or her to get it to $1 million in EBITDA, so we can buy it at a higher multiple. So that's that offering. It's a one-off thing that we're testing. Over the years, we plan on making more Acquiras in different groups, and we're looking for people who also, it's kind of like the phase 2 after you buy a business, for people who are interested in doing a roll-up, is we want to prove that A, we can, further that roll-up using the network and the network effects we have, and B, we can provide liquidity and multiple arbitrage for people.
So the 200,000 are in the value of the resources provided, or in cash?
It's in cash, but we have specific
uses for the cash.
Yeah,
right?
uses for that cash. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Acquira could decide not exercise the option to purchase depending on the performance of the business, right?
Yeah, in which case you got those services for free.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. And what happens if the business falls short of the goals to be eligible for Acquira to roll up?
Well, I think same thing.
Same
You
thing?
know, obviously we're going to be part of the investment committee, so we're going to look into the business and the entrepreneur and make sure that we think it's got a strong likelihood to succeed. We'll also have we have integrators, they're called integrators, but our own integrators will be
Okay.
involved in that process. So we hope to limit that possibility.
Perfect. You talked about the framework and for eventually be a semi-absentee or absentee owner. So the question here is, what are the key ingredients and time frame to take an acquired business to become an absentee ownership structure? Do you believe in buying real estate utilized by the business?
Okay.
So you are buying, or keeping it separate and just leasing the space? So I guess it's two different questions.
Yeah. Okay, I'll answer the second question first because it's a shorter answer. I'm okay with either. There are certain financing techniques you can use if you have the real estate. So I mean, even if you go through SBA, you can amortize over a longer period of time. We recently bought a roofing business in Texas, and it had a real estate component. You can kind of customize the bill of sale to put as much into to basically take advantage of putting as much into the real estate as possible, which will lengthen your term. So I think in this business with a 13-year term instead of a 10-year term, where there's also strategies out there that exist in basically creating a triple N lease and having commercial financing. It's another way to get to the same, basically the same conclusion, I guess. And in many cases, the real estate didn't make sense, and we just continue to lease. In that case, just make sure it's part of your purchase agreement that the lease is reasonable and long term.
Perfect. And the first part of the question was, what are key ingredients and time frame to take an acquired business to become an absentee ownership structure?
So leadership team, the formation of a leadership team is a key ingredient. And then making sure there are different stages of a business, right? Any business we buy is kind of past that startup phase, and I would say into that grow up phase. And the way I prefer to structure kind of grow up businesses is actually across like meeting cadences of the leadership team. So that leadership team needs to have a weekly meeting. Everyone in the company needs to have weekly one-on-ones. There's a specific structure to this. There should be at least a monthly sort of marketing brand, sort of competitive research meeting. There should be a monthly ideas meeting. Outside of that, this is the long answer. Do you want me to get into it?
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So do you want it in order, or it doesn't matter?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. Define mission, vision, and value. So we have a strategic planning process. That strategic planning process actually starts with values and then mission, and a little later goes into vision. I think that's probably the first thing that you need to start with to basically understand what the culture of your company is as you grow it. Making sure the right people in the right seats is huge. I would say every company has a large percentage of the people in the wrong seats. Every company I've ever seen. So there's a lot of, sometimes they're shuffling, and that's sort of that traction, get that, want that, is capable of it. Sometimes there are people who, don't get it, don't want it, or aren't capable of it. You need to either fire them or move them. Having a dedicated people and culture person, I think, is very important in the service business. This is going to change quite a bit depending on what kind of business you buy. But having people systems in place. So like I said, there's a culture and clarity framework that kind of goes all the way from, onboarding and having your first one-on-ones with every person and creating staff directories to, creating current and future org charts and employee value propositions and career progressions and understanding training, right? Like I said, the leadership team and structured communication, and then a huge one is structured goal setting. So most of the companies you're looking at probably don't have structured goal setting. That's where vision comes in. You probably have a longer term goal, 10-year plan. We create a flywheel, which I can share with people if they're interested after the call, or I think we have some articles about it. And that flywheel basically set what we call strategic foundations. Each of those annually you have objectives, and each objective has a key result where you then create sort of action plans for your leadership team.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with, first mission, vision, right? And those statements come first and as part of the strategic planning, and right after, like you said, there's a second tier where you have the goals and objectives, which are, translate into a business plan, right? And that leads into some more detailed planning and processes and establishing KPIs for the businesses start pursuing, right?
Yeah, so establishing KPIs, we always run our businesses through what I call an operating model. Some people call it like S&OP, other people call it demand planning, but that's huge, setting KPIs for every single person in the company, and then making sure that you have this, I would share it with everybody, but an operating model that shows everything from revenue at the top of the funnel, across every funnel, all the way down, people entering the top of the marketing funnel all the way down to revenue, and just conversion rates along the way, right? And then making sure you set the right goals for those, set the right KPIs, set the right incentives for performance. I'm a big believer in performance-based pay and incentives.
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting processes there, lead to contract and order to cash, right? That are common to many businesses. And that is how you finish with a contract out of a lead, right? How you follow up on that interest of a person or a company to get a contract. And then once the order is placed, how do you plan for delivering the service or good all the way down to collection, right? Exactly. And plus there are other, business processes that are, common to many industries and some specific. That's very, very interesting. I have a question here. In addition to those already answered. So when there is a transition of management, like with an acquisition, what are the greater risks you have identified in terms of the organization, in terms of a customer service?
So I think that's the first place I would always start with, right? It's succession planning, right? And there's never always the same risk. I would say there is an ideal amount of time to keep a seller involved, for sure. And that is probably between 6 and 12 months. I really do not believe in keeping sellers around for longer if they're staying on as minority owners. It's just creates more problems.
To allow, to allow a cultural change, the seller or the old owner has to go.
Yeah. So 6 to 12 months is the ideal time frame. Every business is different, right? You need to look at what you've identified in the key man risk. Is it something, sales relationships? Is it license holding? Is it something operational that only they can do? A business that we bought, the sellers were staying around for 12 months and then retiring, but they literally, collectively between the two of them had 6 packs, right? Like literally 6 positions needed to be filled for them to do that. And then the only people who it was a family run business. And in order to keep everybody around, we knew we needed, one of their sons to essentially take over. For their sons to take over, they were in a specific role that nobody else knew how to do. So we had to fill their role first, which took us 3 to 4 months to do. and then get them into learning the different hats. And now we're about 6 months in, and we're ready for one of the sellers to actually retire 6 months early, which is great. But that's just an example operationally. They have taken over the sales side of it, and that's been fine. But yeah, every business is different. 6 to 12 months. Don't let the seller stick around longer if they're a minority holder.
Perfect. Thank you. We have a question here posted by. I'm not sure if I understand the question. I'm going to repeat it and then allow you to clarify if needed. Have you identified potential target businesses, or are you looking for the AEs to bring potential opportunities to you, similar to traditional Acquira process?
So I think that's related to the Snowball. I assume that's related to the Snowball thing. Is that right?
Yeah, about for Snowball specifically.
Yeah.
Yep.
A bit of both. So we have identified it some through, we have our own off-market team that sorts these businesses. I think a lot of it'll depend on the fit for the acquisition entrepreneur. Some people, are a little less geographically or a little more geographically constrained. And if that's the case, and they're interested, and we think it's a good fit, it might make more sense for them to go through this traditional acquirer process. I think what would end up actually happening would be they would go through the traditional acquirer process, while we would probably move our off-market team to start looking in their areas. So it would be both at the same time.
Is it possible here then the following question by how does Snowball work if Acquira is already working with an AE in that region, city? It could be, or naturally there'll be competition.
Yeah, that probably wouldn't make a lot of sense. The businesses are in Northwest Arkansas, Phoenix, and Virginia, Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C.
So perhaps here the recommendation is, if you are thinking of a possibility of acquiring a business for the purpose of selling it through Snowball, then you want to know where already, Snowball has, some positions, right? Before you move forward, or you confirm that a strategy is possible.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Here, I guess this following question may be also to help us with the answer by, have you found the three AEs you were looking for? So I think this is in regards to an email sent by with 3 opportunities. Is that the case?
Correct.
Okay, so are you there? I think I saw you.
Yeah, I'm here. We're always still looking for, qualified AEs for Snowball. Hayden is probably can give you an update as to how many we've had that have taken that next step or not. I'll continue to reach out, but I don't know specifically who's kind of joined on that side and where they are in the process at this point.
Yeah, we're still talking to people. So the answer to that is no. I think sent me 4 people, and I think one person emailed and said they weren't interested, and we're setting up calls with the other 3. But yeah, we'd like to probably talk to more than 3 people. So.
And possibly there could be competing AEs, right, for the same opportunity?
Possibly, yeah. I mean,
okay.
Again, it'll depend on where they're looking and what their background is and what their interest is.
Okay. To everyone, what are your thoughts on franchises and owning multiple in lieu of a traditional roll-up?
In terms of buying a business and starting a franchise in lieu of a traditional roll-up?
Would you like to elaborate more on your question, please?
Correct. So I was talking to Mr. Reuter, and that you can only purchase other franchises within the Neighborly network. So do you recommend going that route and only sticking to that type of thing, or keeping the opportunities open to anything to do a similar outside of a traditional franchise?
So I think what we're trying to do is find an alternative to franchising that doesn't take, heavy royalties. And so my recommendation for people who are interested in that method is probably to roll things up as opposed to, or to buy something and start a franchise, right? Which is different. I wouldn't recommend Roto-Rooter. No, pretty bad reputation.
The other limitation, Hayden, I think, is in digital marketing.
Yeah, so you lose that superpower, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone should look at it and consider which option makes more sense to them, right? If you want to become part of a franchise, obviously you'll get more thorough systems than we'll be able to provide today. But you're giving up significant amount of control and growth opportunity in your own revenue, at least.
Excellent, thank you. So here has a question. I'm curious why Snowball is inserting an acquisition entrepreneur into the process. Why not focus on empowering existing owners to spend a couple of years growing their businesses to 1 million EBITDA?
Yeah, we're doing both. Yeah, good observation.
Mm-hmm. Good. Any more questions? Let me see if we have more, guys. This is your time.
Maybe I'll jump in here with mine. Daniel, I was curious, in the real world of right now with labor shortages across everything, but seemingly in blue collar businesses more than others, how you're approaching that, since you're looking across multiple businesses and different regions and so forth, and how that's informing and changing the system that you're building around acquiring new employees.
That's a great question. So the answer in terms of what we've done thus far is referral programs. That's like one of the first things we do. It's our referral program. We like I said, you need to have a people and culture department in every business. So I think a lot of sellers are use that as one of their hats, but really if your business is people, you really need someone who can basically onboard at least 4 to 5 new employees per quarter. And if you're also, that's if they're doing the recruiting. And if you're getting an external recruiter, they probably need to do that on a monthly basis if you want to grow fast. In terms of what Snowball is trying to do, and this just kind of comes from my background because I've always done this, is we like to use geographic arbitrage. So we're training people in Mexico. I would say like the current state of affairs is that, people have to pay thousands of dollars to go through training and still pay their living expenses in order to then get a job. And it's a blue collar job that culturally isn't that attractive, or has not been painted as attractive in the last 20, 30 years, which has created this problem of, one person entering the workforce for every 5 people retiring. And that's bad for everybody because it also means that businesses are competing like crazy. And it's pretty standard now to have like a $5,000 signing bonus for a tech, right? And that's along with probably the $4,000 or $5,000 in referral bonuses or in headhunting fees, right, that you're paying. So the way we kind of looked at this is, how can we get someone who's fairly well trained for less money and then actually get sort of a lifer, right? How can we actually get someone who cares about the company and isn't just going to leave for a better offer? And so we're training people in Mexico.
It's also for the purposes of retaining personnel and incentivizing personnel, like variable compensation that is not typical in these type of small businesses. And also, like for example, if some of us have worked, in large corporations or executives, we're pretty much used to, variable pay. But in this case, I have seen some, businesses more and more, like you said, setting aside a portion of earnings, for employees to be paid either as variable comp or eventually as shareholdership.
Yeah. So one of the companies we bought has, something like 8% turnover where the industry average is closer to 30. And what they do is they offer annual bonuses that keep on going up. And then so I think they do that for the first 3 years. And after the third year, they enter into a profit share. And so they have a lot of people who've been there for 25 plus years and would never leave because they'd lose the profit share. And this profit share is not equity, right? It's just a small percentage of EBITDA in the company, right?
Right. So
that's a great option.
It's tied to, it is completely tied to company's performance and aligned, with overall goals of the company.
Yeah, and I think, but the thing that will keep people is you do have to have a strong culture, and to have a strong culture, you need to actually focus on culture. So that's where having a mission, vision, values is important, and that's where having a department that focuses on culture is important, and having people systems. Most of these, it's very rare to find a business that actually has one-on-one, right, with managers, which is kind of silly.
Yep, and it's a comment to your last response about training. If you're training people in Mexico, how will they come to your business in the U.S.? U.S. work business? Are they offering work business to blue collar?
So originally, when I thought about doing this, it was to bring established Mexican plumbers to the U.S. People with 20 years experience, get them like TN visas and get them over. That, after talking to a bunch of lawyers, that seemed to be hard to do or unpredictable, at least. So we actually went the other route, which was, why don't we take Americans, and right now it's actually friends and family of employees of the companies that we own, and come and bring them down here and train them on a program over here. And the reason that there's geographic arbitrage, right? They will get everything they need. They can get Spanish lessons, they can live in a mansion, all that. We don't have to pay them anything, but they don't have to pay us anything. They have all their meals, we'll have a cook, we have maid, et cetera. But our costs overall probably works out to over 4 months, maybe $5,000 per person. So it's a way to train people, basically.
And when you say here, that's because you're located in Mexico City.
I'm in Valle Bravo, Mexico. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So people understand that you're physically in Mexico.
Yeah.
And then you intend to send them back to your U.S. business.
Yes. Yeah. So these will generally be, high school graduate, high school, university age people.
So it's like a training vacation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about my plumbers? Everyone is not a licensed plumber, but you can work there. Would you offer like an employee assistant program for training? Have you done that before? Does that work?
Yeah. So for training, what we do is we pay for, we work with a company called ABC, and we pay for their training and have them pay us back out of their paycheck, starting the period after, based on the grade that they get. So if they get an A, it's totally written off. We pay for it completely. They get a B, it's 75% paid. If they get a C, 50%. If they fail, then they pay for it.
And is that helping retain your employees or grow?
Both. No one's ever gotten, I think we had one B in the history of that company. But I think just having, it helps growth-minded people, and it helps attract growth-minded people. And we have a unique advantage in that we can attract growth-minded people and basically tell people, if you start, as an apprentice, you could become a GM of a business, because we buy a lot of businesses, and it's true. So our big thing is to try to provide actual paths up that ladder and help people get there.
So is this like a recruiting tool? Are you able to attract applications to work for your companies by offering tuition and training, or are people not interested at all?
Oh, people are interested for sure.
Okay.
I mean, it's a percentage of people, obviously, but yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Hayden, just quickly going back to your comment about training folks in Mexico, how do you imagine that conversion working? How do you convert that person you just trained when they come back to the States? chances of them actually being employed with the company, or them wanting to be employed or wanting to stay and not quit within a short period of time to get a ROI?
Yeah, the whole idea is that it is meant to be, a certain period in length program that ends with them getting a job at a specific company. So it's known from the start. We're still developing this all out, and we'll have our first cohort here probably in August. So I can give you guys updates on how it goes. But yeah, the idea is this first cohort, we have a company called Anderson in Northwest Arkansas. It's all family and friends of people there who all want to actually get a job as a service tech.
Got it. Yeah, no, this is super interesting. I would love to kind of follow along and learn more. Now, if you get certifications, does that transfer over to US from Mexico, or they would have to kind of go through that process here again?
It's entirely, so every state is different. Arkansas is one where all you need is an EPA certification, which is basically, you pass a test. So for HVAC, it's particularly useful. And what we're doing this is for HVAC training. So I would say, like, if you were doing plumbing training, there's a lot more licensing required. What we'd probably do in that situation, and we will do plumbing training, is we'd probably actually get them started with a remote academy at the same time, so they can log their apprenticeship hours.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense.
But basically, with their training in Mexico, they should be able to pass for any licensing in their respective state.
Yep.
That's the idea.
Yeah, that's the idea. Again, it would work. It works particularly well in states where licensing is less strict, right? So New York also, licensing is not strict. Texas, licensing is not strict.
What is remote apprenticeship? How do you do the work remotely?
That's a good question. I need to look into it.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure that you can. There's actually a lot of VR stuff going on right now as well, which is interesting. But there are a lot of these academies that will give you your hours as long as you show up remotely and pass the test remotely, just like remote schooling.
Okay, so that doesn't necessarily mean hands-on experience.
It's classroom experience, right? Which are hours towards your apprenticeship.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
And here we have a question that's related to that. Thoughts on ways to work through licensing requirements in different states where you do not personally hold licensure as an owner.
Yeah, so you can use RMOs, which is something I am not an expert in. Amir is the one who's set all that stuff up in other companies. But basically you're effectively like renting somebody's license. If you're using SBA with RMOs, you get into kind of cloudy territory. But if anyone has a specific question about that, I would suggest maybe Daniel, you could forward that to Amir, because he's dealt with this quite a bit.
Yep, because
Yeah.
I would think that the purpose of a license is for the business to operate under certain standards, right? That's why, using someone else's license may be, in conflict potentially.
That's the purpose. I mean, there's also, depending on the state, the license boards can be very laissez-faire. So I know in Montana, for example, like there are tons of business. You have to look at who all the master license holders are. There are tons of them where it was like the secretary is a master plumbing, has a master plumbing license, and never held a wrench in their lives, right?
I'm curious if, from a real high level like strategic point of view, because you guys must be seeing the whole industry and so on.
Hello, did I miss something?
I think he had a baby he had to tend to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we lost Daniel too, but Matt, we'll have you take care of the baby, but you have your hand raised.
Yeah.
Daniel, you're back too. Would love for you to go ahead and ask your question.
My question was in regards to taking a majority stake in a business as the first purchase. going back to you having that owner in the loop for the 6 to 12 months with the complete idea of purchasing 2 or 3 other businesses in addition to that, how would you kind of keep the owner out of the other business acquisitions to take place in the future? Or and this is from myself not holding any licenses here in Florida, so I'm still looking into the strictness of how to have someone else be that individual to qualify the business. But yeah, so lower liquid capital at this time, so taking the majority stake with the idea to purchase more territory.
But wanting to use the seller's license to do so.
Correct.
Yeah. I think it's just very clear communication and expectations, right? So I think you probably want to identify what the seller wants to do. Most of the time, it's not operations, right? And you could also mention, like, you know, what we are looking to do is build a board-run company, and we'd love you on the board, right? And a lot of people are really chuffed about this idea of being, you know, a board member. But in that way, they are involved, and they strategically can be very helpful, right? And can give you resources. And I think that's an ideal way to get sellers involved.
Okay.
They may also be more interested in one particular area, like, you know, training as an example. And you can just say, this is your role, but it's not operations or day-to-day.
Okay. So keep them involved, but on a board level after the 6 to 12 month period.
Yeah.
Phases out. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Any more questions, please?
So I'm curious about the real high level strategic view that you guys must have of like acquisition entrepreneurship across the country, in service industries, plumbing, HVAC, that kind of thing. Is that like what sort of is the volume of opportunities for that versus the activity taking advantage of it? And is that ramping up? Is the expectation that in like 5 years there'll be fewer people retiring, more people who've been going after these opportunities for 5 years? So is there going to be like a squeeze on opportunities to get?
So in terms of home services in particular? Yeah. Private equity just like descended on HVAC, residential HVAC, probably in the last 6 months. Just, you know, it brought multiples up immensely. I would predict the same to start happening in other home services. And, you know, they got into it for the same reasons we got into it, right? As we got into it probably like October, September 2019, just worried about recessions and what are sort of long-term businesses that automation is probably not going to kill and are recession resilient. We sort of thought, okay, these home services, you know, licensed businesses. I would say the opportunity. So in terms of what are we interested in long term, I think the ability to probably be operationally competent enough to purchase smaller businesses as tuck-ins will be a strategic advantage over other private equity firms. But I would expect private equity to jump on this scene on everything that from plumbing, roofing, maybe not things like landscaping or moving or things like that, but anything that's skilled, sort of not do it yourself. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's going at it. I'm curious, do you think that there's, I don't know if a squeeze is the right word, but the idea that there's kind of an opportunity there to replicate an approach, right? Like somebody's retiring, especially, or a business is run by somebody who either can't scale it to the level it needs to be to actually just get into normal private equity or get a great buyer. And like for Acquira, for example, they focus on people who ran a great business, but didn't do the digital stuff, didn't do the systems, didn't do automation. For whatever reason, they didn't want to grow it or they couldn't grow it past a certain point. And so they'd like to retire or cash out of it. And so is that going to just have more and more acquisition entrepreneurs and companies like Acquira and PE funds going after the same pool and sort of squeeze it?
I I mean, I think so. Like if you're asking like, is this going to get more and more competitive? Yeah, it's going to get more and more competitive for sure. I think there are a lot of ways that you can approach it, right? So you asked the question about like, why don't we work with sellers? Like there are different types of sellers, right? There are growth-minded sellers who tend to be younger, who feel like they've either reached their operational limits or maybe just don't want to sacrifice their lifestyle. And they might want to, have other people come into the business, maybe expand the business through acquisition, right? I think that's an area that we want to move into and an area that will grow rapidly. And in terms of just people buying businesses, and from retiring sellers, that area is becoming significantly more competitive, which is good if you want to buy a business now because it means your exit multiple will be higher.
Very good. Thank you. Was your question answered?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sure. We have, please.
Yeah. I've got a question, being a systems guy as you are, and you've probably tried everything, being across multiple organizations and subsets of organizations and then companies under those organizations, where you sort of arrived in terms of the best tools and things that you think we could benefit from as we go into this with you guys, and just thinking about organizing, multiple projects, multiple teams, multiple agendas, multiple strategies without using a dozen different tools and a dozen different systems.
Yeah. So generally speaking, when you look like a constellation of tools, you want to standardize around one ERP. So Snowball standardizes around Service Titan, and then we standardize our financial systems as well. We standardize our CRM. So everything is the same, and we have people who are competent on onboarding those systems. In terms of, other systems, like everything's in Coda. We have these things that are called clarity boards, right? Every employee has a clarity board that houses all their meetings, it houses their scorecards, it houses their job descriptions, it houses the company's, handbooks and mission, vision, values. It's kind of a one-stop shop for everything. And the culture and clarity framework is basically the framework that allows the acquisition entrepreneur or the integrator to create every clarity board, right? So that's kind of the people systems across all of our businesses. And everyone's seen Coda, so you know what that looks like.
Cool. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Wow. 50 minutes have gone by quickly. But we still have some time for more questions. Thoughts on acquiring health, pain clinics, chiropractic, physical therapy, acupuncture?
Love the space. I think there's, licensing issues there. Are you or someone a licensed chiropractor or physical therapist or acupuncturist?
Not at the moment. That was one of the things that was interesting. You mentioned earlier, potentially bring somebody on that has that license or that capability already. So that was something I was interested in as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to service, home service businesses. It's easily grown through digital marketing, referral programs, all the same stuff. Service business. But I love the space. The same with like vets and stuff like that. But you just need to work around the licensing.
Thanks.
I know, Hayden, we have expertise within Acquira from you and other people regarding digital marketing. What are your thoughts on the difference between digital marketing for business to consumer versus business to business?
Extremely different. I would say business to business is more of a sales function. And we do have training and procedure on building sales teams, which is actually probably easier to grow and overall cheaper to grow. But extremely different.
Are there businesses that are hard to grow via digital marketing and you would suggest avoiding?
So not local businesses. There's nothing I've encountered that is extremely competitive and hard to grow. I would say there are probably, to your point, business to business businesses, there's just not enough traffic, right, to make it grow through digital marketing. But like I said, that's more of a sales function, right? You build a sales team, much like we do off market sales teams, right? I would say if you're going global, if you're looking into, you want to buy a business that's, ranking for organically for some extremely competitive term. Obviously, I got my start in SEO and digital businesses. I'm no longer doing them for a reason. And that's just like they have the capacity to go to zero overnight and it's uninsurable. So I would say if you are not a massive risk taker or you don't want to make a portfolio of like a dozen plus businesses, you should probably avoid them.
Okay, we still have time for some more questions.
I
believe this conversation has been great so this far, Hayden. Thank you. Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I was going to ask, and this might be kind of basic here, but in regards to the Acquira's willing to be a partner up to 30%, how do you guys show that initially? So as people are sourcing businesses and they're asking for proof of funds, how does Acquira like to get involved on that initial from an agreement standpoint so that the business purchase can be larger? And this is going to be going through SBA. So that's the 10% down part.
So we have in the past, it was with an actual Acquira employee though. So there's a little bit more trust, but we did just wire him a few $100,000 to show proof of funds. There's probably a way we could do it. I haven't thought about it. But yeah, there's probably a way we could do it as well.
Like put funds in escrow or something like that, just so that they can see it. And if
something like that, yeah.
Who would I talk to discuss that?
Probably Rich or Amir. Okay. I would need to, yeah, that's something that would probably need to be brought to the board level. So I probably need to talk to my partner about it. So
one question here from was wondering, what are really kind of some of the best ways to go after building those relationships kind of on the legal side, on the tax, CPA, accountant side, and some of those other key partnerships? Obviously, there's things like LinkedIn and some of these different places, Search Funder and so on. What are your guys' like most strategic, I guess, ways of building those relationships before you actually need them?
That's a good question. We tend to just test people. So I don't know if we have a great answer to that outside of we've worked with a lot of people and we just tend to continue working with the people that we enjoy working with and have done a good job. So, I mean, that's one of the value adds that we offer acquisition entrepreneurs is that they use vetted vendors. But I don't think there's anything that we've done in particular that has, been a brilliant way to vet them before we actually hired.
Yeah, hey, and I'll jump in. This is Rich. Hey, yeah, so we have a few, especially on the professional services side, we have a few vendors that we have just tended to work with. Hayden's absolutely correct. Usually we find out the quality of the particular professional through actually working on a transaction with us. Right now we've got, a few stable ones that we believe can add a lot of value at this level, that we've used over and over and over again, and we're always looking to add those. Part of what I'll do periodically is reach out to various professionals, accounting, legal, on a marketing side, that's probably going to be more of Vlad's area, but especially on the financing, the accounting and legal side, I'll tend to reach out and vet a few new potential vendors here and there, and start those conversations. But we keep a running list that we provide to those who are at that stage and would like to definitely speak to someone. So definitely feel free to reach out to me and I can provide you with that information as needed.
Thanks, guys.
And I would think, Rich, that they have to continuously earn their place. So feedback from acquisition entrepreneurs that have worked with them, it's crucial for us to evaluate their performance.
Absolutely, absolutely. Obviously, if there's ever a situation where there's a problem, we'll try to work through that, resolve it, but we'll definitely try to understand what the issues are and whether that particular vendor can continue to meet you guys' needs as you move forward. But one thing we're trying to do, trying to innovate on our side too, is to provide kind of what I would call, not necessarily discount pricing on services. Sometimes that's what it amounts to, but we're trying to find ways to kind of put specific vendors together to kind of give you guys preferred pricing. So instead of working with like the lawyer and the quality of earnings consultant separately, maybe we put those two together, you work as a team, and then you get a better value for what you're looking for on a particular transaction. So we're trying to come up with ways to make sure you guys have opportunities to take advantage of better pricing through our relationships. And obviously you guys are, can feel free to reach out to your own, obviously, but we're trying to bring kind of a package deal for you guys so that, if we can get two of them together that understands the entirety of your transaction, as opposed to having to explain the two different, like an attorney and a QOE guy, and then both of them having to spend time on trying to actually understand the transaction, as opposed to bringing them in at the beginning of the process, which will save you a lot of time and effort. We're looking at ways on how we can kind of structure those types of offerings for you that will provide, the value on the money side in terms of your expense, but also on the service side. So we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to provide those types of vendors for you guys. And as I said, definitely reach out to me if you're looking to speak to one or the other. I'm always in contact with our attorneys, with our QOE consultants, obviously with different financing sources as well. But yeah, that's about all.
That's a good point. And my recommendation there is also, when you go to other vendors, just make sure the scope is comparable, so you can then compare, apples to apples when it comes to pricing. Obviously, all of them are interested on the volume of the possibility of offering services to more than one AE. That's why, obviously, they understand they got to be competitive in their offer in terms of the service, in terms of the pricing. But if you find also, good providers as a community, feel free to, share them so we can improve the offering for everyone else.
Everyone, I do have a 4 o'clock.
Yep.
So if there's any other questions, I can answer quickly, but these were great questions. And if anyone has any other questions for me, feel free to shoot them over to Daniel, and I'll get back to you.
Yeah, no, excellent, Hayden. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
The conversation has been great. Next week, we have a business broker, and probably the following as well. I believe we have talked about business brokers on a, I guess, pejorative or not necessarily positive way. But we are going to give them the floor, and ask questions to business brokers, right? So we can understand them better because we need to work with them. So that's what's up for next week. Any final comments, guys? We can, wrap up and continue our activities for today. I'll hopefully see you next week.
Yeah, I have a quick question. And this is just for, I'm curious now. Does that just have I don't know, does that just have a pretty bad reputation? The company, sort of the franchise?
I personally did not know them, but Greg, do you have a comment, or someone else has a comment? Go ahead. I don't understand why, Hayden.
He was mentioning Roto-Rooter, I think is what he had mentioned. I'm curious to know about that too, myself.
Okay, so yeah, plumbing company. I was talking to a broker, and then I was talking to a corporate rep of someone that's selling their franchise, and I'm getting mixed sentiment on people's feeling for them. So I'm just curious if anyone had any, personal direct experience or reason as to why it's not a good franchise.
I have no idea, but you know who would be great to answer that question? We should have, we should get Quinn on, Daniel.
Okay.
Because Quinn Hoffman, who kind of runs a lot of the plumbing HVAC businesses that Acquira Kingmakers owns, he probably has more insight into that. I'm sure Hayden has his thoughts, but I'm sure Quinn
can also speak to that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, could probably provide the substance behind that.
Okay.
But that's a good question. Maybe we can get Quinn on next week, just briefly to kind of discuss and.
So on that, I have some follow-up conversations tomorrow and Friday with them. Is there any way I can just like shoot him a quick note on a?
Yeah, shoot me. Please shoot me a note through SMS, and I'll get an answer as soon as I can.
Okay, so just text you.
Yep, please.
Thank you, Daniel.
Okay.
All
okay,
right.
guys. Well, thank you all very much, and hope to see you next week again. Okay.
Thanks, Daniel.